Okay. It's Sunday, April 10th, 2005. I'm Alan Brzezinski, Commander, American Legion Post 72, Lemery, Hackett, in Saugerties, New York. And I am here with
Bill Freer, United States Navy.
United States Navy. Did you, were you enlisted or did you?
I enlisted and I went in service in Albany, New York, October 1, 1943.
So, okay, do you remember your first days in the service?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Bill.
On service or the first day?
First day and carry it from there if you want.
Oh, the first day with the physical, sitting on the cold marble benches. We stayed overnight at YMCA in Albany. The next day, we loaded aboard the New York Central Railroad train and left for Sampson Naval Training Base, Geneva, New York.
So, do you remember anything about your boot camp experience?
I remember getting off at the bus, the first greeting from all the sailors present, we were classified as shark bait. Shark bait, shark bait. That was how we were greeted.
Remember your instructors?
I remember, but not by name, and some of their favorite comments are not meant for a family program.
Yeah. What was your MOS, your job assignment? What did you join?
Because I had kitchen experience at boot camp, I was one of the monitors for the chow line and the serving counter. And that carried over. And from boot camp, I went to electrician school, Sampson, New York, for 16 weeks. And there, because of my experience as being a monitor, I was made the division officer in the class in the school.
So you became an electrician's mate then?
I graduated, interestingly enough, there was 120 in the class. The first 13 went to ICC school in Washington. I came out 14. I missed by 0.03 of a point of beating the man who was 13. And his name was William Fuller, and my name is William Freer. So I often thought, a table's been reversed. What his assignment was, I would have had, and I wonder to this day how he made out, because my assignment could have been his. So 0.03 of a point might have meant life or death to me.
So after your school, after your electrician thing, where'd you go? Ship?
I went aboard the USS Arkansas, which is the oldest battleship in the fleet at the time. The keel was laid in like 1911. It was in World War I, and I went aboard in March of 1944 at the Boston Navy Yard.
And then after that, did you went?
After that, we left for Europe by way of the northern route, which was past Newfoundland, Greenland, and 9 days later, we arrived in Belfast Bay, Northern Ireland. From there, it was just practice and waiting until the invasion of Normandy.
So you were in the D-Day invasion on the ship?
I was in the invasion of Normandy. In fact, Eisenhower reviewed the invasion fleet a week or so before, and as he went by, I was peeling onions in the vegetable aisle.
You're an electrician.
The invasion, of course, was June the 6th, but it was originally scheduled for June 5. So to make up for the 24 hours, the invasion fleet sailed north in the English Channel for 12 hours, and then we turned around and sailed south for 12 hours make up for the 24 hours. Our ship was at Omaha Beach, and we stayed there until we bombarded Shorebird, which was June 25th. What I remember most vividly was how choppy and rough the channel was. And on the first day, we came up, the engineering force, which I was in being an electrician. After almost 24 hours, we came up for some air and sunshine. And at the time, we were bringing amputee cases aboard because there was no facilities on the beach to treat those men. And while we were bringing them aboard, a German bomber went overhead. He was so low I could see his silhouette in the cockpit, and he missed us. But I was afraid that he would turn around and then machine gun the deck. And we made a quick exit and went back below decks. Through the whole course of the war, which was 4 invasions, 2 in Europe and 2 in the Pacific, the Arkansas was never scratched.
So that after Normandy, you went there to the...
After Normandy, we went to southern France. There was an invasion there
Right.
to help with the main frontal assault in Normandy. And after that, we returned to the States in October '44 to be rearmed in the Boston Navy Yard. And then we proceeded for the Pacific. We left Boston the day after Election Day 1944, through the Panama Canal and up to the west coast of the United States. We went to California, Long Beach to be exact. On January 20th, 1945, we left Long Beach for Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, where we picked up supplies and then headed east towards Iwo Jima. And we were participated in the invasion of Iwo Jima. We started a week ahead before the ground assault, bombarding the fortifications.
Oh, so that was the third invasion there.
That was the third.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, we were in the invasion of Okinawa, which was the most difficult of all the invasions for the Navy, because during the invasion of Okinawa, the Navy lost more ships and men than they did the entire war. A lot of it was due to, at the time, the Japanese kamikaze attacks, and we were fortunate enough, we shot down 6 ourselves, and we were, as I said, we were never touched.
Good shit like that. Do you remember any of the, did you remember any of your friends from the ship?
Oh yes, we stayed close. You know, you had some closer than others, and after the war, it was some time before we had our first reunion, and a couple of my shipmates who I look forward to seeing never made any reunions, and we lost all contact with them, which I was very disappointed.
There haven't been any reunions since?
I've been to probably 4 or 5, but now, due to the advanced age of all of us, we haven't had one in a number of years.
Did you get any medals or citations?
Only the nothing special, only the normal ones of the European theater, the Asiatic theater, the Philippine liberation, the good conduct, and the basic ones, but nothing special.
So you weren't in Leyte or invasion of the Philippines? Were you in that?
No.
Okay. Leyte. And you stay in touch with your family?
Wrote every other day. My mother wrote to me every other day, my family.
Wow, mail and it all came through. So the food, how was the food on the ship?
Well, that was one of the reasons I chose the Navy, because our kitchen and our bed went with us. We weren't sleeping in foxholes or snowbanks like the Army boys in the Battle of the Bulge and so forth.
Did you get to see any R&R or any USO shows?
Oh yeah, I saw Irving Berlin came aboard, Jack Haley. There was a pitcher from the Detroit Tigers, Virgil trucks, they call them fire trucks, Virgil fire trucks. And there was others not so well known that I don't recall at this time, but Irving Berlin was the most famous.
Get any leave like in Australia or Caledonia?
We had on the islands out there for R&R, we could get a can of beer or something. It wouldn't help you at all, but one of the islands' name was Mogmog. You probably never heard of it.
No.
But that's what it was, and we were at course in Guam, but as far as names, places, there was nothing special.
Do anything for good luck or anything like that? Or?
No, I think the good Lord took care of us. That was our good luck,
Yeah.
because you don't go through 4 invasions and not
No.
get a scratch.
You know, do you have any photographs of your friends or any of the?
We have aboard ship. We had yearbook for the Atlantic and the Pacific, and I have them both, and they will be handed down my children and grandchildren.
Where were you when the war ended in the Pacific?
Well, first of all, when let me see now. When the war ended in Europe, May of '45, we were at Okinawa, and to celebrate that, the whole armada lined up and fired a broadside at Okinawa all at once. And our ship backed up about 3 foot in the water, because we had, our main battery was 12-inch, and we had 6 turrets, 2 guns to a turret, so we had 12-inch guns. And at one time, my duty was a searchlight platform, and I put a penny on the deck of our platform, and when the 12 guns went off, the broadside, the penny from the vibration jumped to my waist, which was approximately 36 inches from the vibration. What you did was, when they were going to fire, a buzzer sounded, you turned your head away and closed your ears to protect yourself.
From the blast was going?
And if you didn't do that, and you did it enough times, you had a symptom, what they call shell happy.
So when Japan surrendered, you were off of Okinawa then?
We were anchored out in Okinawa, and well, that was August. When we got the word, we were watching a movie aboard ship, because the Japanese were vanquished at the time. There was no air or naval power that they had left. But one interesting note, we never traveled unescorted without we always had destroyers and destroyer escorts as our picket line for anti-submarine protection, warfare. The only time that we ever traveled unescorted, we left Guam for the Philippines in June of 1945, and we couldn't believe how come we're out unescorted. And of course the officer said, Japan's Navy is not a power to be reckoned with anymore. So the answer to that was, why the hell don't they send us home? So we made our voyage uneventful. A month later, the Indianapolis made the same voyage and was torpedoed and sunk with 1,000 sailors losing their lives. I believe what happened, I think we were a decoy because the Indianapolis brought part of the atom bomb to the Pacific. The atom bomb was brought over in 3 parts and assembled in Guam. The Indianapolis brought part of it. And I think the Japanese intelligence knew that, and they were laying for the Indianapolis. And I think we were sent out as a decoy, but of course the Japanese were smart enough to know that that was the Arkansas, not the Indianapolis. A month later, the Indianapolis went down.
So where were you mustered out from the Navy?
Oh, before, one of the things that we were in, after the war, we were in Buckner Bay, and weather warning came up for a typhoon. So we left Buckner Bay to get out into the East China Sea, and where the typhoon hit us. There were waves 100 foot high. We knew they were 100 foot because our wheelhouse was 100 foot above water level, and the windows were broken in our wheelhouse from the waves. We were fishing bodies out of the water for days after because small craft were absolutely unmanageable. They were just floating like corks, and if they banging into bigger ships. The heavy cruiser Pittsburgh, the bow was ripped off by the storm. And that ship managed to get back to Guam without a bow into dry dock. And to me, that was one of the greatest accomplishments of American ingenuity and workmanship, that you could build a ship that would maintain its watertight integrity without a bow.
So after that you had...
After that, let's see now. Then we did what they call the magic carpet. We were naturally out in the Pacific, and every available naval vessel that would be headed towards the States would bring Army and Marine personnel back home, so we could get them home as soon as possible. And that's what we did. We picked up Army divisions, but to make room for that, I spent a couple of afternoons on the crane because the electricians ran the cranes. And I myself, probably operating that crane, dumped millions and millions of pounds of shells into the Pacific. We didn't need them anymore, and we had to make room for supplies and for the oncoming soldiers. I often wonder today what the environmentalists would have thought of that. Mostly what I dropped in were bombardment shells, which were about 800 pounds apiece, and the armor-piercing shells, which were about 900 to 1,000 pounds apiece, and they were used for naval gun battles, and of course the other shells were used supporting the landing troops. And we made a couple of trips, one to Hawaii, and I'll tell you one feeling that I'll never forget is we're on our first trip home. We've got the soldiers aboard. We're coming into San Francisco, and we're sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge, and our band is playing California, Here We Come. Quite a feeling.
So, beautiful band on the...
Oh yes, we had a good band. Yeah.
So then it was San Francisco, is that...
San Francisco celebrated Navy Day, and we made another trip to Hawaii, pick up some more soldiers back again, and then it came to leave time for us at Christmas, and I left Oakland, California, the railroad station there, Treasure Island, on the 20th of December, And the 20th of December was the greatest day of American railroad travel. More passengers were carried that day than any other day in the history of the railroad. That was to get the servicemen home for Christmas. My hometown was Poughkeepsie, New York, and I got home Christmas Eve, about 8 o'clock at night, Christmas Eve. And I'll tell you what a feeling that was. To come home alive,
Yeah.
to come home Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Well, there I had 30 days, and then I went back to Treasure Island. They wanted me to re-enlist for 6 months because our ship was to be taken for a test in Bikini Atoll. That test was July of 1946, and I said no, because our ship was going to be the center for an atom bomb. And my ship was my home for 2 years, and I didn't want to see it blown up, and I didn't want to sacrifice 6 months more either, so I turned it down. But in July of 1946, the Arkansas was blown up. They tell me in pictures that when the bomb exploded, my ship went about 40 foot in the air. It now rests on its port side in the atoll at Bikini in the Pacific. I would then, I'm not sure the exact date, but I was discharged in Lido Beach on the 16th of May, 1945, and I was down at Brooklyn Navy Yard for 6 weeks or a month, just waiting for discharge.
In Brooklyn. So after that, did you, after your naval experience, did you go back to work or take a GI Bill?
I took the GI Bill, and I went to school for a year. I didn't get a degree, but I didn't care for the courses that I was taking. I guess it was too much of a change for me after the war years to sit with a textbook.
So how did you exactly become an undertaker for a while?
I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to try it. Because I figured I was a cook prior to that, and you gotta eat, you gotta die, so I was always sure of a job.
So you didn't do that, nothing of that came from the GI Bill, you did that on your own? Or?
I did that on my own. In fact, I was a cook. I worked at Smith Brothers Restaurant in Poughkeepsie before I went in service. And my father said he would sign my enlistment papers.
Mm-hmm.
He says, you're the one that's got to go. You ought to have the right to choose where you want to go. But he said, just do me one favor. On your application, don't put down you were a cook. They might send you right out, but if you go for something else, they might send you to school, which ended up to be true.
So you joined, I know you joined the American Legion.
I joined the American Legion. Why I waited so long, I don't know. I joined the American, I was discharged in 46, but I didn't join the Legion until 1950 or 51. And my uncle was a World War I veteran, and he was always after me to join the Legion. I joined it, and then when I came up to Saugerties to work, I never transferred, so I would have 54 years now, but it's not continuous because I never bothered to transfer it over. Then I joined Lemery Hackett, I think I joined around 1963 or 64, I'm not sure.
So how did your service and its experiences affect you in your life after?
Well, a lot of memories, but I think the best way to sum it up is to say, I wouldn't take $1 million for my experiences, and I wouldn't do it again for $1 million. Because I know my luck would run out. You don't go through 4 invasions and walk away without a scratch.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think I pretty much covered it from Normandy to the typhoon.
Mhm.
Well, sometimes maybe a little humor. If we anchored out and there was leave, and of course, some of the boys come back, they weren't able to walk up the gangplank, and E Division, my division, we operated the cranes, so we would bring them aboard in cargo nets.
Okay.
I'm not going to give any names though.
Okay. All right then. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Alan?
Yes. Oh yeah. Okay. Thanks.